Hello, and welcome back to your favorite podcast, De-Inlfuence. Guys, we're stirring it up a little bit. Today we're getting crazy.
We're changing it up.
Y'all are in for a treat, and I'll tell you why this is a treat. First of all, we have a special guest. I've known this person for 10 years. So crazy. But the most special thing about today's guest or today's episode is this is Jordan's dream episode.
It really is.
So you guys know we have Daisy Kent. We have Jess from Love is Blind. We have Brittany. We have all the gals. It's a great girly time. But now Jordan gets to have his moment. And y'all know he's into conspiracy theories. He's into things that are weird. Like he has a mind of his own. And so he got to bring on one of his special guest requests today. It's actually happening.
This is big because I need everyone to go in the comments and say that they love this episode because I have a whole guest list.
He wants to bring somebody from the FBI, someone from Area 51.
There's a lot of internal debate that Jordan's guests don't fit the brand of the podcast, but I would argue that they do.
No, I think they do.
I need to rally the support behind me, and our podcast producer reads all of the comments, so I need everyone to give this episode 5 stars and go in the comment section.
No, I think y'all are going to love our guest. Okay, so tell us about who we have today.
Okay, so I've referenced him a lot. His name is Jefferson Bethke. He's a New York Times bestselling author, and he wrote the book Take Back Your Family. So I guess when did I meet Jeff? I guess I met Jeff through you.
So Jeff is technically like a viral content creator. He is a Christian influencer, maybe influencer author that really is a Christian. You can't put him into a box at all because in fact, I feel like he defies a lot of the Christian norms and he writes about that a lot. He actually went viral. I don't remember what year this is. He'll speak about it. Probably 15 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, on YouTube for a video that it was like a poem that he recited about Jesus over religion, why he believes in Jesus, like the concept of Jesus, over these man-made, religious religions. And so he went viral. I mean, that video probably has hundreds of millions of views, if I had to guess, especially now. And so then he kind of entered this world of being an influencer. And 10 years ago, when I started my YouTube channel, we connected because he was always so supportive of my videos. I think there weren't a lot of Christians on the internet. So when you saw another one, you were like, hello. Yeah. Hello, we support you. So he was always shouting out my channel. I would shout out his channels, his videos. And so it's really cool because then once we got married, I was like, you got to meet this guy. He's amazing. And y'all became buds.
Yeah. So he gave me his book, Take Back Your Family, invited me to this kind of dad's mastermind community. And I was like, no, it's not super relevant. It was when you were pregnant with Stella. And then I read his book towards the end of your pregnancy with Stella. And his book kind of changed my life and my whole depiction of fatherhood in so many ways, because what he argues for is hey, your job is not to be a babysitter to your kids, it's to be a coach and to develop them over time. He talks a lot about multi-generational living and the role that grandparents play in the family. And so I'm excited for this episode because I think it's going to be very practical and value packed for someone trying to raise young kids, which I think is a lot of people in the audience.
It's going to be amazing. We're about to change some lives.
Change some lives.
All right. I think he's about to walk in. Welcome back to De-Inlfuence. Woo, nailed it.
We got Jefferson Bethke today.
Yes.
So listen, not to put any pressure on you for this episode. Okay. This is the first De-Influence episode that is my episode.
Wow.
I chose the guest.
Thank you.
I rallied to have you on. Dani loves you, obviously.
No, obviously.
So you voted up, she voted down, and you had to arm wrestle.
Last episode, we had Daisy Kent, Bachelor. Now we got Jefferson Bethke.
What does that conversation look like when he's like, hey, let's have someone, let's have a
I was really excited that it was, I was really excited that it was someone that was normal because he always wants these crazy outlandish people that are that work on Area 51.
Oh yeah, the blurry creatures type people and all that stuff.
Yeah. So he was Jeff Bethke. I was like, oh great,
I've
love it. I'm here for it.
I've never been more proud to be called normal.
Yeah.
How's the press tour going?
It's good. It's crazy. Book tour, press tour, doing press, podcasts, all the stuff. But I mean, right now my buddy Matt who's out of camera. We're going We've been in like 6 cities in 6 days. We're about halfway through. Dallas for a little bit, which would be fun. Yeah. Then we go to a fort somewhere in Indiana that I think only 3,000 people live. Oh. And apparently it's an event for 500 people. So I'm about to pull, what is that? 20% of the 15% of the town? Let's go. I'm excited. I'm excited.
So we introduced you a little bit before we kind of pre-recorded an intro. But for someone who doesn't know Jefferson Bethke, how do you explain yourself and what you do?
Quickly, I say I started making YouTube videos back in 2011, 2012. That's how we first met. OG YouTube days.
I talked about that.
Yes, literally before. It's gone through so many iterations, but we were back in the early days. And then for me, in the same way that you've kind of evolved, it evolved towards more like writing, speaking, kind of entrepreneurship, businesses. So I don't really do YouTube anymore, but I really care about family. I care about fatherhood. I care about men. I care about relationships. And so me and my wife do stuff in that kind of space. There you go.
Do you consider yourself a Christian influencer?
I've always wanted to know this.
I guess define your terms a little bit. I mean, Christian, yes. That one's easy.
You define your terms.
I mean, it's always like how I would love to, you're so much more in this than I am. So I would love to hear like influencer. Certainly do I hope I'm someone of influence? Yes. I feel like I'm trying to steward, like there's eyeballs, certain amount of eyeballs. I want to steward that. I want to honor that. But I also feel like technically everyone is influencing at different scales. 100%. There's that as well. Yeah. But I would say Christian influencer, the only thing I would just, in the same way that, I don't know if you feel this way, but when someone calls you an influencer, do you love it or are you kind of like, eh?
Oh, it's so cringe.
Yeah. Okay. So I feel the same way with Christian influencer. I'm like, and especially once you start bringing God into the mix, it's like, no. It's like, let me show you my 15% off code for the Bible.
Right, fair enough.
Do you know what I mean? It's a little weird.
Like,
it's a little weird.
Do you consider yourself a Christian author then?
Yeah, 100%. I would own that one. I would own that one.
Okay. So before we get into like everything that you write about, tell us where you're from, how you found Jesus, like how you even got started on the path, almost like De-Influence Jeff.
Okay. Born and raised Seattle, Washington. I actually threw some shade this morning at Oklahoma. I was in Oklahoma City this morning, and they stole our Thunder. I don't even know, literally, like they stole the Sonics, and they called them the Thunder, and they drafted Kevin Durant. So big Seattle guy, born and raised. Durant. Yes, thank you. Yeah. Oh, yeah. He's UT. Is that right?
Yeah, UT.
Yeah. So like we love him because the Sonics actually drafted him, and then 5 minutes later they stole our team. So there you go. But yeah, from Seattle until I was like 20 something. My wife Alyssa and I, we met at a friend's wedding, and we got married, started having kids, and then when we started dating, she was living in Hawaii, so we dated long distance. So we moved out there. Once we got married, she really wanted to stay there, and we've been there for a decade. And moving to Franklin, Tennessee in 4 weeks, which is awesome. But how do I start following Jesus? College. So I kind of grew up in a Christian context. Like I'm sure, like a lot of people in the West in the early 2000s, the answers, right questions and right answers. For me though, it wasn't real. Like I wouldn't say there was anything about my life that was focusing in that trajectory or that perspective and just doing other things. College, I played baseball in college. I go to a little school called Point Loma Nazarene in San Diego. And in a span of like 3 weeks, got kicked off the baseball team, got put on academic probation. And then my first serious girlfriend broke up with me, which is like a decently bad 2 weeks, in my opinion. That's decently bad. So I'm the personality where I kind of have to get like just shocked to the system to wake up and kind of go meta for a second and be like, what am I doing here? And those were the life circumstances that did that. And I'm a little weird. Like a lot of people that have come to faith, a friend told him or whatever. I'm the weird guy where I just immediately went to the library and I was like, I need answers. And so I just checked out like 17 books and I just went back to my dorm room and read for a few weeks. And honestly, that was how I started walking with the Lord. I just was like, oh man, the Jesus that I thought I knew about and this, Swedish man with long straight hair who's like a hippie and really nice. I was like, I don't think that's quite the Middle Eastern first century guy I'm seeing in here, full of love and grace and truth, but really fierce and really tender and really gentle. And so, that was really impacted me and woke me up. And that was 15 years ago now.
So how far between you finding Jesus through that path and then the viral
video is like 5 minutes. It's like, Jesus, I should have chilled out a little bit.
You already had that view of religion so early on.
Yeah, it was honestly, I think it was about 2 years later, but but I think the reason why those videos looking back on it had kind of gotten impactful, I think, is because I was wrestling with a lot of that stuff in my own journey. I was like starting to walk with the Lord, follow Jesus, and then be like, a lot of this stuff is not adding up. There's like, I'm seeing this, but I'm feeling this and reading this. And so then I was just kind of like expressing through the spoken word stuff. And then, which Matt's also the one that filmed it.
Did you ever?
Wow. Dude, you filmed that?
He's filmed every video for me for 13 years.
Wild.
Can you imagine if every video you guys have ever made for the last decade and a half was one person? There you go.
How many views does that video have?
YouTube's in the 30s, I think, and then Facebook has about the same, so 60 or 70 or 80 million views. Yeah.
Y'all, this video was epic at the time.
Crazy.
I have to ask, y'all need to go watch it if you haven't. My biggest question that I asked you, like when we first met in Utah, was, do you believe everything that you said in that video to this day?
That was good. That was a shock to the system.
Yes, good question.
And tell people what the video is about.
Yeah, so it's called Why I Hate Religion But Love Jesus. And it's basically this juxtaposition of kind of, and again, a lot of language, we're going to get a little technical here for a second, is cultural and evolves, meaning words will mean something for a particular period of time. And then as people kind of move and shift in a certain way, the word takes on like baggage, right?
Like slay.
Yeah, exactly.
Like slay was a bad thing, exactly. And now it's like slay.
Exactly. And so it's like words do that, and that's culture, and that's fine. At least in that moment, I definitely felt like religion was a word associated with just kind of like earning your way to God, doing all the right things, climbing a ladder to heaven, cleaning yourself up, making yourself more righteous. And again, that's very opposite of the actual gospel message in the scriptures, right? Jesus is so unique that he's kind of like climbing down the ladder to heaven, coming to get us, not saying climb the ladder up, come to me. And so I just wanted to really paint that black and white juxtaposition. And so that's what the video is about. Do I agree fully with everything I said? I'd have to go back through it line by line. I certainly probably, well, it's weird, right? Because it's like you grow, you get older. I feel like the tone, I'm like, that's a little cringe, the tone. I watch it now. Do you know what I mean?
But at the time, it was so cool.
Yeah, exactly. How do you feel when you watch your YouTube videos from 13 years ago?
Horrible. I can't even watch them.
Yeah, that's literally, especially the poems. Some people still play those at churches before I go up on stage, and I just like have to like exit the room. Like, this is so like, let's not.
Yeah.
I barely had facial hair at that age. You know what I mean? Like, it was just like, it was real.
You can't even listen to last week's episode.
Oh, the podcast. We're like, oh, what did we say? We've never listened
to a single episode we've ever recorded. Like, I'll have friends come up to me and be like, oh, you talked about this. And I was like, did I? I blacked out.
Exactly.
Well, can I ask you something? So you found your faith when you were in college.
Yep.
Then what was your childhood like, or your home life like? And how has that influenced how you raise your kids and what you write about to this day?
Great question.
Man, great question.
That's a deep one. We could probably answer it for the rest. I would say, I was raised by a single mom. Shout out to my mom if you're watching. She's one of those moms that watches everything. What's up, Mom? She's amazing. I love my mom. She's a hero. She's incredible. But at the end of the day, too, also very rough upbringing. Like she was, she had some mental illness that was a lot more serious then. She's amazing. It has kind of, gotten health now, mentally healthy now. Social Security, Section 8, food stamps, you name it. Like we were like one click above homeless my entire life. What's funny is when you are raised in that environment in a normalized way, where like my mom and dad were never married, they never got divorced. It was just always me and my mom. There is a weird normalization with it where you're just like, I don't know anything different. You know what I mean? Until you kind of get older and you see some friends and you start kind of taking notes. But how did that affect me? So the cool part is I have a lot of people don't have very good view of the church, right? From like their childhood or youth group days or whatever. Like, I got burned by it, or at least that's the common message you get on the internet. You go on Twitter, that's the common message. For me, it was the opposite. For me, it was like, man, they showed up big. Like we're getting groceries on our doorstep all the time. Like other fathers of like friends of mine in the church are taking me on camping trips, taking me to baseball games. So I have like such a very, very warm view of church. Certainly in my childhood. But it was never real, like I mentioned. It was just kind of like swirling around me, if that makes sense. And life was pretty tough at home. But how does that affect how I raise the kids now and stuff? I feel like for me, and almost what I just said, like I'm very sensitive. I think, I'm going to say this in a Christian way. I think the Lord uses, if you've gone through suffering, as a gift you can have towards other people if you've healed. But you could also say that, I think, even without the Lord. Meaning, if you've gone through a really hard thing, I think that tends to be your gift you can give to the world. And so for me, like I'm hypersensitive to like a single parent kid, or I'm sensitive to like if they feel left out, or I'm sensitive big time to like kind of lower income families. And if they can't afford baseball equipment, like I couldn't, if they couldn't, stuff like this. And so that's how I think how it affects us and my family is like we have resources now. Me and Alyssa are married and healthy. And so we're constantly as a family on a mission to kind of look for those opportunities, look for those things. And so for anyone listening, I would say that too. Like, think about if there's hard things you've gone in your life, you have to heal first. You can't use them as a strength until you've healed properly. But if you have healed in them and done the hard work, then it's like, man, that is actually, don't block that out. That's actually kind of a conduit of where I think you can be used really greatly in the world.
Well, and also, just to state the obvious, you wrote a best-selling book about the role of fathers in families. And I think that is like using suffering to study and dig deep into something and then help others, understand their role in the family.
Can I ask something? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, are you...
I love you guys' dynamic, by the way.
We've never...
This is mine, Alyssa's marriage to a T.
Really?
To a T, 100%.
Wait, in what way?
Just the like, let me say,
I'm sorry.
You got thoughts. He's got thoughts. We all got thoughts. I love it. I love it.
We've never actually talked about this, but are you, did you ever get in touch with your dad? Are you close with your dad?
Yeah. So me and my dad, it was kind of the custody thing when I was younger. I would go see him every other weekend. And now it's just like a cordial relationship is what I would say.
Sure.
But it's like, it's tough. My dad did not make the best choices in his life. So it's like, a phone call to my dad feels like it's lasting 3 hours. I ask every question known to man to try to relationally connect. And then it's like, 47 seconds went by. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you're like,
That's
yikes. Hard. So like we have a cordial relationship. I love him. He's awesome. But it's not like super deep, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
One other like preface question, because we're going to dig into your book later. You're an Enneagram 8.
I am. Can you tell?
Hard 8.
100%.
I'm an 8 with an 8. 8 with an 8 wing.
Do you think you're a healthy 8?
That's a question probably for Alyssa, not for me. But yes.
Okay, good.
Yes, I do think I am.
Unhealthy 8s are like really hard for me.
No, I agree. And most people say that. Like 8s get a bad rap because they're just jackasses. Can I say that or do I have to bleep that?
Yeah, it's okay.
We gotta bleep that? Okay.
Yeah, we're good.
That's probably the first time I've sworn all year. So there you go.
Okay.
But they are. Like it's like, dude, chill out, be nice, be kind. So I would hope I'm semi those things, which then maybe makes me think I'm somewhat of a healthy 8. But I like being an 8, man. I really see the world through like the challenging lens and just like, why do we do this? Why are you doing that? I don't understand. Well, which basically every single one of my books. Every one of my books is like, why do we do this?
And this is how I've described you on other podcasts is I've said, listen, this is someone who understands what's a cultural norm in that moment.
Yeah.
Right? So when hustle culture and Gary Vee were pumping that culture, you were like, hey, I'm going to write a book called To Hell with the Hustle that says why this is actually really dangerous.
Yes.
When COVID years hit and the family was being torn down, you were like, hey, I'm going to teach families how to take them back.
Totally.
You got a new book, which we'll talk about in a second. But I think 8s are the only ones who can do that.
Oh,
right?
I'll receive that.
Because it's like,
what are you guys, by the way?
3.
I see that.
100%.
I see that.
1.
I see that. Guys, we are so stereotypical, our numbers.
Right? I know. But it kind of makes it powerful.
Yeah.
So whenever you're writing your books, especially when it came to Take Back Your Family, since maybe like there was a lot that you wanted to infuse into your family that you didn't have growing up, like where are you finding this information or your inspiration or these resources that actually help grow your family?
Great question. On the macro, tons and tons of reading at probably a pretty crazy level of just the research of sociology, ideas, tips, etc. I took a ton of wisdom I do take a ton of wisdom in my family from business and sports books because, as I allude to in the book, like healthy teams are what families need to be, right? And the West has kind of overcranked that to making the individual the most important thing at the expense of the family, because there's no really shared mission in a family. And so when there's no shared mission, then it kind of devolves down to just the individual's comfort and consumption as the main
individuals.
Goal.
Sorry, can you say that again? Individuals.
So how would I say this? So
explain it like we're 5.
My brain's about to explode.
Yes. So individualism is one of the highest ideals of Western culture, which is a great thing, by the way.
Because we're focused so much on ourselves.
Yes, and it's a great thing. Like,
tell us how you would see that playing out in culture today.
Well, I think we can go on the macro level. It goes all the way back to like literally like the Declaration of Independence of caring about individual rights, caring about like the individual, vastly important. And so all I'm saying, I think that value has swung so far that we see in our culture today that now anything that's a hindrance to the individual that, pre 50 years ago, pre 30 years ago, we would have called, oh, hey, maybe if something's limiting you, that might make you grow. That might stretch you. That might make you have to build some grit. We've swung so far that now anything that like oppresses the individual is evil, wrong, and should be stopped. Right. And so, and that's really, really, my argument in that book is that's really, really damaging to the family because the family then becomes actually like, and this is Western culture certainly believes this, that the family is almost limiting to the individual. When I think the biblical argument, and certainly the ancient argument, even outside of a religious argument, is that families are created to be teams, right? That there's roles on teams, right? Just like there is with the Warriors and the Patriots and all these sports teams, and different capacities and roles and giftings and talents. And that this team, and I'm coming from a Christian perspective, so I absolutely believe that God has put a husband and a wife, or even if you're a single parent or a blended family, he's put your family together with your particular kids because the world needs that team to go do a thing that they could not do by themselves. Like that's the definition of a team, is that you're trying to accomplish something that if you were just by yourself, you wouldn't be able to do, right? Okay.
Totally understand.
Okay.
I'm gonna.
Did I explain that okay?
Hold on. Okay. Before we get into the book, I really want to set this up right because I want to dig into the book.
Okay.
Wait, which book? Yeah, because I have a
the new one.
About
The man.
Okay. But I want to go over the man one too. But
Yeah. Take back your family.
There's so much to talk about.
So much.
Before we do that, I want to give like a little bit more preface on Jefferson. So. Number one is I really want to ask a simple question. Okay. What was your GPA in high school or college?
Do you really want to know?
I really want
to know. Under 2 at both of those. I got kicked out of high school, kicked out of middle school.
You just didn't apply yourself.
Yeah, I got kicked out of college.
You didn't apply yourself. So that's insane because I have been asking you to launch a newsletter for years. He reads the best information.
I do like reading.
He talks about, you're probably the most influential person outside of...
I'm not de-influential. I'm not de-influence. I'll receive that.
Out of the Lord.
Jordan, that means the world to me. So thank you.
And here's why I want to back up before we get into the book is because I think that one of the things that you do incredibly well is you take on so you are a Christian, you've identified yourself as a Christian author, but what a lot of Christian authors do is they really kind of like they don't engage with culture. They're like culture's over here and Christianity's over here. And it creates a rift where people get funneled into the church and then they have no impact almost with the outside world where that's just not how it should be. That's 100%. Not even what Jesus would want, right? Yeah. And I think what you've really inspired me to do is lean into different topics and say, okay, well, here's what this author from the New York Times or the Atlantic is going to say about this, but here's how I'm going to engage with it from my worldview as a believer,
100%.
As Jesus being real. And so I think you do that so incredibly well, but I'm shocked that your GPA was under 2.
It was, dude. I was getting kicked out. I did freshman year twice.
Because you are incredibly well read. I want to ask you about like a lot of what you do is like you debunk like cultural norms.
Yeah. I did good on the SATs, by the way. I just need to support myself somewhere. There you go.
So how do you choose like the topics that you're going to lean into?
Great question. Like with books and what I'm thinking about in that season?
When you decided that hustle culture was rampant and it was actually really detrimental, there's a variety of things you could choose in terms of conversations. You've chosen hustle.
Yeah.
Jesus over religion. Yeah. That was like OG.
Yep. And then kind of some like young dating engaged stuff for a bit. We wrote that stuff.
Right. That was early marriage.
Hustle, family, now manhood.
Yeah. Okay. So how do you lean into the topics that you're going to cover? Is it more of a conviction, spirituality thing, or is it based on, I hate to say this, but like what's trending on Google in the sense that like this is such a cultural conversation that someone from the church needs to engage in the conversation?
I think that's a simple answer, actually. It might surprise you. I honestly write books based on just what I've been personally wrestling with the last 2 to 4 years. That makes sense? So it's like I write Jesus Religion because I was wrestling with that. I wrote Love That Lasts, which is like our relationship book to like kind of young college students when like I was 3 years out of that. You know what I mean? And then Hustle, same thing. Like I was kind of pushing myself in my 20s where I was like, man, this is not sustainable. I need rhythms and rituals and a spiritual formation-based life. So I wrote that. And then all of a sudden we have kids running around and I'm like, what the heck? We're like, how do we meld this team together? Wrote that.
Yeah. It almost like holds you accountable to research and figure it out.
Yes. Yeah.
That's kind of like when I went through my hair loss journey, it was kind of the same thing where I was like, okay, I can either
you start going down the rabbit hole.
You start going down and I'm like, I can either cry in bed about this or I can become like an expert in scalp health and like figure it out.
Yes. So that's how many people can say that, by the way,
Yeah.
Experts in scalp health. Is that what you call it?
Well, big time over here.
Big time.
Do you feel like you try on all 3 of the ones, I guess the manhood one is too new to know, but like on the family conversation, on the hustle conversation, do you think that you were early to the pendulum swinging backwards, just right time, right place, or kind of late to the game? And
Good
the reason
question,
I ask is because if you're too early, no one cares that in terms of hate.
Yes,
because you'll be speaking.
No one agrees with you and sees the pain yet. Yeah,
right. Like you wrote "To Hell with the Hustle" when people were still in the
I got really lucky though with the pandemic on that one.
Yeah, that's so true.
A year later that happened and everyone was like, I mean, that book sales shot. After I'm like, I could not have predicted that.
Perfect timing.
Yeah. So do you think like what have you learned from just the timing of going into these conversations?
That's a good question because you kind of did it backwards from the like if people might be really disagree with you. Again, maybe it's the 8 in me. Like I don't even consider that. I'm like, let's talk about it. Let's argue right now. I'm down.
So 8. Just
you know. And I'm not super intense about it. I'm just like everything's up for conversation. I love that premise of life. Yeah. And Alyssa doesn't like that premise of life. A lot of people don't like that premise.
It kind of makes me
she's
like
a 9,
cringe.
so she's just like any conflict.
Oh no,
we're an amazing marriage, guys. I swear.
Yeah.
But no, the 8 and the 9 is a very intense.
They're like opposite.
It's like they're opposite on conflict, and that's really tough. Really tough.
So I also think, and I'm really not trying to build you up. I'm trying to kind of identify what's original about you. When
I
it
like
comes
that.
to,
am I original? I see that. I see that.
I feel like you're writing about very different conversations that the church.
Yeah, and I'm trying to. Yeah, I agree with that.
And so have you gotten pushback? You're a Christian author, self-identified. Have you gotten pushback from Christians on any of the topics that you've tackled?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I'm blanking on my subtitle to Take Back Your Family because it's like a 4-year-old book now or 3-year-old.
Something about the nuclear family.
Yeah, but I basically knocked the nuclear family, and that was a landmine that I kind of threw out there for fun.
Oh, I got DMs about that. I'm like, you have to read the book.
Exactly. It's like once you read it, it makes total sense.
Yeah.
But that one, like that stuff for sure. And I definitely stepped on some landmines, but I love it.
He just loves it. That's just
I'm like actually like when I'm kind of bored, I'm like let's throw some landmines. Exactly.
I love that.
That's awesome. Okay, let's get into Take Back Your Family. So I want to first.
Take Back Your Family.
We're going to Take Back Your Family and Fighting Shadows. We're doing all of it, baby.
Yeah.
Oh, that's the one you want to talk about.
Yeah, let's talk about the catalog.
Okay, let's go through it all. I'm ready for it.
The reason I want to talk about Take Back Your Family is it's my favorite book. I haven't read the new one yet.
You have to record tomorrow's thing that we're doing.
Yep. So it's my favorite book that you've written. It's really impacted the way I view raising my family, developing a team, switching out from father to the father figure being a babysitter to more of a coach.
Bro, I'm using that tomorrow with the fellas. Don't steal my
thunder. I want to ask, like, what inspired you to get into that conversation first?
Yeah, so that one was, you've met Jeremy. Jeremy and April are like our closest mentor friends of ours. And they're just a really unique family. You know, everything you've been even saying about me, I hope aspirationally is true, but of him it's true like right now. And he's just so out of the box, such an interesting thinker. But the main thing that really turned the tide is he spent a lot of time in Israel and the Middle East. And it's kind of funny when you just live outside of a certain country that has a very, very particular value set and be like, oh, the rest of the world doesn't really live like this and believe like this with family. And that was really it. Like that kind of like starts pulling the thread, and then that's like, it's off to the races of like, oh, you keep pulling on that.
Meaning he found that U.S. families were very
weird,
different.
Very individualistic. Didn't have any generational aspect or vision to their, you know, like again, modern day, you go to Israel, you go to the Middle East, you go to Morocco, wherever, they would in general, if you were to say, hey, tell me about the word family, or paint a picture of the word family, or go in your household and show me a picture of your family, most of them would go to the fireplace and show you literally like a 9-generation, 172 descendant picture.
Wow.
And you're like, that's just, we would literally not answer it like that. You come and you ask America that, and it would be like the fireplace picture is literally like the two parents, the 2 kids, a white picket fence, maybe a dog, maybe the kids got helmets, maybe a homeschool. I don't know.
Yeah.
Right. It's just like, it's a very different picture of, and it's really, there's a lot of subtleties in there, but it's based in consumption, entertainment, and safety. We have to wrestle with this as parents, meaning parents in the West think they're doing a very, very, very good job if they keep their kids entertained, like we keep them busy. We think that's doing a good job. And if we keep them safe, like we think that's a paramount value, which it's paramount in the sense of course, safety is important. But no coach on a sports team would ever say safety is the goal of why we're all together. Right. It's like a byproduct of just being a healthy team. The mission is the goal of finding clarity on what you're doing together, trying to extract roles and different natures of all the kids. And how fun is that, by the way, right? Like how fun is that to look at a kid and be like, why did God put you on our team? He must have put you on our team because we had a gap before you showed up. Like we were missing something on our team before you showed up. Do you realize how like life-giving that is to a kid, right? Some people might think it's pressure, but it's actually the opposite. It's actually the opposite. There was a really interesting study. I don't think I included this in the book because I found out about it after. Psychologists did a bunch of research on kids from 0 to 18 on what was really important to them, right? And from 0 to 5, the most important thing is self-esteem. So like kind of that identity base, like you are loved, you are loved, you are loved, you're safe, you're safe, you're safe. What I'm just saying, that's true. But we think that's 0 to 18. Yeah. We think it's just, and that self-esteem is almost can turn cancerous, right? And they found 5 to 18, the most important thing is not self-esteem, it's mission. That kids have to have a bigger picture than just their consumption, their entertainment, and their life. And when they have that, they thrive. When they be like, oh, I'm actually here for a reason. Besides just like paying Nintendo Switch and doing all the things and playing on all the sports teams just for my whatever. And those things are fine. Like I'm shout out to Super Mario Kart. I love Switch. And shout out, right? I play Fortnite with my boy and it's like the best memories of my life. But it's, but yeah, it's like, that's really interesting, right? That they actually have clinically found that a kid having a bigger meaning outside of themselves is the most important thing from 5 to 18.
That's really cool.
A lot of like Jonathan Hates.
Have you guys read his new book, by the way?
No, not yet.
Anxious Generation?
No, I need it. I need it. I've seen it.
It's like, I think it got New York Times bestseller last month. It's so good. Yeah. His whole premise is that we are basically raising kids to overprotect them in the real world. So we protect them too much, like helicopter parenting. Like there's kidnappers everywhere. Don't go outside, basically. When in fact, it's never been safer to live literally in like a neighborhood. And we underprotect them online, give them a device that has porn, anxiety inducing things, all these crazy websites. And that's like a fascinating premise.
Yeah.
Right?
But one of his main things, solutions to the problem is unsupervised outdoor play.
Exactly.
And it's just crazy. I'm always like Dani's, we're outside now. And I'm probably extreme, but like we're outside now and
you're like, turn around. Turn around.
Stratton's like on the house, on the roof.
And I'm like, don't supervise it. Like, don't supervise it.
That is actually pretty funny.
No, but it is crazy. I think that there has been like an over focus on like, keeping our kids safe. So how did we get here? Because you write about this a lot in the book in terms of like the history of how Western culture got to where it's at. Yeah. You have another question?
Yeah. I just want to
hit a double whammy.
Biggest question before we move on from that. You talk so much about mission for your family. So what is your family's mission?
Great question. So we kind of have, if you go to familyteams.com, if you're listening, we have some discovery tools on there for that. I think it's a very malleable in wet cement type of thing you need to identify. Because some people feel, depending on the personality, some people feel very overwhelmed by that of, I need this really clear, pretty distilled sentence.
I'm overwhelmed.
Yeah, and it's like, no, it's a very easy thing to just reverse engineer and work backwards from what are we good at? Like just add up the gifts and the skills and that's pretty much your mission, right? Like if it's extroverted or if you're hospitable or if you're a businesswoman and a businessman, like you guys are, and then how do we integrate kids into that rather than disintegrate kids to that? Doesn't mean they need to work there and doesn't mean they have to take over, but it's just asking those questions in a really soft way. And then like the momentum starts to take care of itself. So it should be a long discovery process that takes at least a couple of years to like pay it. And certainly if your kids are 7 and under, like you're kind of in a paying attention mode, but you're not really getting a ton of clarity on mission for the family yet. It's like a training season.
But are you speaking to them about their mission?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I would say we're using the language at that age.
Yeah.
And we're just getting out of that age. So now it is really fun to see the kids really step up and use it. Like, okay, I really can see your skill set. They do say who you are, 0 to 6 is pretty much who you are, at least personality wise for the rest of your life. That's very interesting. Isn't that interesting?
It's so sweet.
It's sweet, so but also kind of like, oh man, that's a lot of pressure.
Creepy, but
a lot of pressure too on the parents. But it's really sweet because you look at your kids and you're like, that is their personality. Where was I going with that? So yes, it's just about paying attention. And when you have young kids, I think there's no pressure. So like what me and Alyssa did, I'll just be technical, probably 5 years ago, we do an end of the year summit as a family and a married couple then because the kids were too young. And that's just going to a hotel for a night. And that's just like finding 10 really good questions online. I have a whole thing now, but I don't want to overwhelm people. It's like, how was our year? Where do we use our gifts? Where do we use our skills? What does next year have in front of us? How do we feel like God wired me? How do we feel like God wired you? And there has to be a convergence point of those giftings or else he wouldn't have put us together. And so it's just asking those questions and then kind of trying to write something down. So we have what we call pillars for our mission, which is like 7 really, really, really big terms of like hospitality, apprenticeship to Jesus, health, some of these really big things. We just say, we are about these things. These are our mission. And outside of these things, we're not about it. And what's really cool is when you have a clear mission, it also allows you to not have family overwhelm, which is so common nowadays. Because if a choice comes at you, you just go, that's not us. I don't have to sign up for every baseball team, every basketball team, do everything, be the person that helps in the school and do this because our mission's over here. So hospitality is probably the one that's the easiest for the kids to retain because we literally like bet every last amount of our dollars on like building a compound with a guest house and we host events on it. We let people use it for baby showers and worship. Like our house is used more than I think anyone I've seen use their house. But that bet was because it's what we believe we're here to do. And we have the perfect convergence for our skill set on that. And there's some friends we have, I've known them for 10 years. I've never seen the inside of their house.
Yeah.
It's like, that's not their mission. You know?
That's probably us.
Except for right now, I'm here, baby. I'm here.
No. We played Settlers of Catan last night.
Yeah. We're getting better about it.
But it doesn't have to be your mission.
Right,
exactly.
See, I love that.
That's such an 8 thing where it's like, hey, I'm not this, I'm not that, I'm this.
Yes.
Right? And being wholly focused on that. And I think it's something
And I'm like, what do you want me to be?
Yes,
you want me to cook in the kitchen? I can do it today. Like,
I do think that is such a strength of an 8th is not feeling this sense of comparison, right?
Totally.
So I think that we struggle with that a lot where it's like, oh man, we should be more hospitable or we should be more this. Instead of focusing on our strengths and saying, hey, these are our pillars, we focus on our weakness. Do you find that other families in Western culture struggle with that a lot as well?
Yeah, 100%. And I was at again, I think I mentioned earlier, I was at a men's breakfast this morning speaking to a bunch of men, and this line I said to them that I think applies to what you're talking about, is I said, there's no generalists in the kingdom of God, there's only specialists. And we don't wrestle with that enough. We all want to be generalists. We all want to do everything, do a little bit of everything, be good at a little bit of everything. But like, the kingdom of God, at least in the Christian narrative, is specifically using like war language. It's using feasting language, team language. There's all these different metaphors he uses. And all of those encapsulate, like, if it's a feast, everyone brings a different dish, right? If it's a war, you have certain people on the front lines. You have certain people on the cannon. You have certain people on the watchtower. And so it's like, I just wish we would lean into being more understanding that God created you and whoever's listening as a specialist for the kingdom of God. Your wiring, your gift set. And here's the cool part too, is like, you were put in this place and time because God believed that this place and time needed you. That's really encouraging in my opinion. Yeah. And so it's like, you are a specialist for people and in this war that we're in of good and dark and all that stuff. And so I think just remembering that is really, really important. And yes, I do think families struggle with that though.
I see that a lot with when Stratton was born. Like, I felt like he was such a, and of course, I mean, Stella was our first, but I feel like he is so different than the rest of our family. Like, he's so joyful and loving and just brings this, and he's only 2, but you can tell their personality. Totally. And it was like, man, this is like a missing puzzle piece that was finally filled. And like, I already feel that purpose.
Yeah, he's like the guy that like he comes on all the trips with us because he's the fun guy. He's gonna make us have fun. He's gonna be like, guys, stop working. We're here to
That's amazing.
And we did that, and like Stella's over there like organizing her shoes. You know, and it's just.
But that's a perfect example of like, you guys are paying attention to your kids, and you're paying attention to where they can fill these gaps in a really cute way right now. But I bet in 10 years it'll be very darn close to what you're saying of like, man, he lightens us up in a way that we really need because we both go hard or whatever. And then her with organization, she can maybe be integrated into the family. There's all these different ways, but it's kind of this sensitivity to be just like, pay attention and ask God to give you a picture of who your kids are and why they're in your family. It lights you up, but it also lights them up.
And love your kids for who they are.
Exactly.
And not trying to make them someone else. I felt a lot of, and it wasn't necessarily my parents, but just like the way I was raised, I always just felt like I wasn't good enough, or I had to be this, or I had to be that. And it's exhausting. And then I think that insecurity, unfortunately, like even bred into my 30s. Like, and it's because I think in childhood, I just like, you never think you're good enough.
Yes.
When it comes to like how we got here as like a Western culture, you write about this a lot. What are some of the pivotal moments
of how we got here?
I
would say there's honestly a lot. The two that are easy for people to understand that kind of can quickly show how we've made some really big leaps with family. The first one would be 1945 to 1960, which is considered the wealthiest 15 years of any country of any period in time. Wow. So post World War II, just like the economy went to a stratosphere that we've never seen before. That's where we got the creation of the middle class being really strong and robust, and all these different types of things. And what the ramification of that was, that sociologists have studied, is no one needed each other anymore. Mm-hmm. This is one thing we don't wrestle with, but like pre-1800, if you literally did not depend on your family team, you would die. It's just that simple. Yeah. I mean, you would just die. Like there was no such thing. There was literally no such thing in 1720 of like a single person getting like a job in the city and like sustaining themselves.
You would starve to death.
You would literally starve to death. So it was like an actual need to share resources. And of course, I'm not trying to go back there. So I like the influence we have in the Western culture, but it has ramifications. And so that one of like, oh, we don't need each other anymore. And then what was really interesting too, is a lot of people then started moving away from their generational families in post-1960 for that reason, because they had enough resources. And then you get to about 1990, we have an economy lag, and now everyone's kind of left out in the cold of like, oh, I really wish I was by my family right now, but now we live 5 states away. That's a whole other thing. But then the big one that really makes a lot of sense for people would be the Industrial Revolution. Technically, there's like 3 or 4 of those. They started at different times. But in general, what the Industrial Revolution did was kind of, as we know, it was an agrarian society that then went to a machine society, an industrialized society of machines, extraction and production at a really high level. And what that did is mainly took the father out of the home, meaning like it changed fundamentally the home. The home in 1750 was, you were a blacksmith family, you were a farmer, you were whatever. And your whole home had kind of this organism level relation to each other. Mm-hmm. Kids were certainly contributors and like employees of that company, not like just consumers. Now, again, I'm not arguing for child labor, but that's just true. And that's why they actually had a lot of kids then, is because they needed more workers. And so there was like a dance that was happening. And here's another way to put it. The economic engine of the home, of the man was in the home, or the family was in the home, meaning like, and in a capitalistic society, this is just by default, we get most of our meaning from our work. That's fine. That's true. But what happens when you rip that out of the home, now there's no missional identity left for that family except to be safe, consume, and be entertained. And so that was a huge shift that just like happened that we never wrestled with. Now, I'm not saying again that we all need to go home and work. Mm-hmm. I work away from home. I'm traveling right now. There's the variations to that. But I think, and Wendell Berry talks about this in a lot of his poems, that, you can have an industrialized job that you need to bring an agrarian spirit to, and you can have an agrarian job that actually has an industrialized spirit. So he's not saying it's the actual job. It's like the spirit of like integration and like actually tilling the land in a metaphorical way, integrating your kids in a certain way, tapping them in their gifts and skills. So there's a lot more, but like those are two very, very big historical moments that like just family looks really different now.
The one thing I want you to touch on that I think is going to give you your moment on this podcast.
No pressure.
99% female listener is you talk a lot about how this has really stretched females in the home really thin because as they went back out to work. So speak to that. You talk about it in the book.
Yeah, well, I'll reference Wendell Berry again. If you're listening to this and you have 15 minutes, I think one of the greatest essays of the 1900s is an essay by Wendell Berry called Feminism, the Body and the Machine. And he's just a brilliant poetic thinker that's kind of deep. It's amazing. I like cite it like 7 times in my book. But he has one really interesting rhetorical question in there where, again, this is a very prophetic thing he's saying. So I'm not saying I'm arguing for this, but it just makes you think. He basically is arguing that like the industrialization of all of our work is bad. It kind of has made us cogs in the wheel and we like don't do work that's really meaningful anymore, right? We're just in an office tapping into a keyboard. We don't know what we're doing. And it's just at the extraction of the person at the top to make all the money. Whatever. You can agree with that, disagree with that. But he basically says, he goes, men have been doing that for 100 years. And he's like, and now women are chasing that. And he basically says, his line is, why would you chase the same slavery that the men are in? Like you have shackles on, why would you chase their slavery? That's really interesting to think about, that like most women see that I want to go work, I want to go do my thing as like a proliferation of themselves. When his argument is actually like, I think both the man and the woman are wrong, at least in trying to do that. I don't totally agree. I just think it's really interesting to think about. So what I would say is this.
The trad wife?
On TikTok? Oh, 100%. Yeah. Sourdough baking. Yeah, 100%.
It's coming back, baby.
But I think that's why.
Full circle.
Well, The Atlantic did an article on this from like a non-Christian perspective. And basically it was on the trad wife. It was a trad wife critique. But they kind of like admitted that why it's compelling. And they basically said, at the end of the day, the mom still has to come home and do the work. Yeah. So it's like, it's not like, it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard to do it. Like she's got to do this. Like it almost said like now she's got to do everything. And so
now she's got to film herself too.
Exactly. And Instagram and all that. So I would say the way I would articulate this is, again, back in that pre-industrialized version of a family, there was a team-oriented nature of the home, right? The family, like not only was the mom and the dad working in a really beautiful dance, but like what people don't realize, and this is certainly all over the actual scriptures because this is the ancient Near East in the first century, there was like 20 people in the family working in the home. Mm. So it's like, and so we get these visions of that, of like, oh, they're making bread and doing all these things and they have cattle and all this stuff. It's like they did, but they also had 20 people in the home helping them.
Yeah.
And now we kind of like extract that out and say, oh yeah, just Dani, it's your job to do all the things with no help and no grandparents and no things. And I know you guys integrate your grandparents in an awesome way. I mean, your parents in an awesome way, the kids' grandparents. But it's like, so the person who has been hit the most from the familial changes the last 100 years has been the woman. And I actually think they need to and go out and work if they want to and use their skill set and all those things. But we have to reckon with what solutions do we have as a family to make sure that both the husband and the wife are supported and they're both working in a sustainable way and using their gifts in a sustainable way.
Yeah. So tomorrow you're going to be meeting with a bunch of Instagram husbands.
Let's go, baby.
Can you tell more, like for people that are listening what that is?
So Jefferson was rolling through, and so I pulled like all of the Dallas like Instagram husbands together, and we're doing like a little informal secret society mastermind.
Let's go. I'm going to wear my Skulls jacket.
The reason I thought it was so cool to bring you through, and I think I don't really do things like this, but I felt really called to do it because I felt, in our situations, like our wives are the ones who went out to work, right? Yeah. And a lot of the struggle that a lot of these guys have is very early on when they switch over to this industry, they lose that identity that they were raised with of being the provider. Yeah. And it's a huge ego hit. Yeah. And we've been doing this together for 6 years. So like I'm kind of, I went through it, I'm evolved out of it. And so I try and help coach a lot of the guys that are going through it because it's like, hey, you need to see this as like a team thing, not as this is what it's doing to my identity 100%. As a provider. Yes. Because it there's nothing wrong with like Dani or any of these wives being on the internet and doing a job that they love and they're passionate about. But it does require us to come more into the home.
100%.
Right? To be more hands-on with the kids. Yes. And I think that where this industry creates a lot of friction with marriages is that
100%
because the men,
well, and the roles they think they have to play in traditional roles.
Right? And that's why
let's talk about this. This is fun. This is actually my new book, so we can jump into it.
This is perfect.
The oversimplification of roles of what is a man as a provider and going out and it should look like XYZ and the woman should be trad wife XYZ.
Totally.
They're too oversimplified in this,
Let's talk about this. This is fun conversation.
Oh man, you're gonna go into your new book. Before
I don't have. Sorry, I'm psyched because I have a whole point on that.
You'll go. I know you.
Bring that one back to me. Bring that one back to me.
You're gonna run. So what
boomerang it back to me in 5 minutes.
So what I want to do is I want to park on that for a moment.
Okay.
Super excited you're coming tomorrow. You talk to us about the Western families. When Jeremy and you go to Israel.
Yeah.
You do a really good job of pulling inspiration from Jewish families, from Muslim families, and talking about different cultures and their family systems and structures. Paint us a picture of what families outside of the West look like. What could be the ideal for someone who's listening and says, hey, this family thing isn't working for me. What could it look like for a new family?
Well, I think the really good place to start is anywhere outside of the West tends to have just a lot longer memory of family, both in the past and in the future. So like when they think of what they're doing, they see themselves as like links in the chain for like a 500-year play. Like they really do. And then if you were to ask a Jewish person, who's your great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandpa, who would they say? All of them now, globally. They'd all say Abraham. That's kind of wild that like a collective group of people would all point to the same grandfather. And even God, think about this. When God wants to communicate himself to us, to the Israelites and to his people in the scriptures, his descriptor, this is wild to me actually, his descriptor is a multi-generational family God. He says, I'm the God of what? Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's wild to me that from his mouth, he's saying, hey, I want to give you my name. I want to let you know who I am. And he could have chose any other descriptors. I'm the God of love or whatever. His actual name is I'm the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. 3 generations of dead people I want to tie myself to because I believe in these really long visions. Christians could never even come close to doing that if we'd be like the God of I don't know, I don't care, and I'd never met him.
Yeah.
That's wild.